Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about the state of IRPE in the California community colleges. My name is Daisy Segovia. I'm the Associate Director of Research and Visualization here at the IRPE Group. And today I'm going to be taking you through some results for the survey that we conducted last fall, asking about what you guys are all doing in your IRPE offices. So in a moment, we'll get started. I just wanted to let you all know first that yes, this session is being recorded. So we'll be sending out the link for the recording at a later date. And you'll be also getting copies of the slides as well as the report that should be published today. So before we get started, just want to let you know, we want this to be, a conversation. We want to know your thoughts about what results you're seeing. So if you have any questions, please throw those in the chat, and I will do my best to address those as we move forward. And if we're not, we'll have some time at the end of our session to discuss what we see today. So for today, we're going to be going over a few different things. I'll first start off with giving you a little background and context about the survey that we've conducted here now for almost 2 decades. I'll be going over about 5 different key findings that we found from this administration for this time around. And then we'll also throughout kind of the different results that I'll point out, we'll offer some national comparisons for an Association of Institutional Researchers survey that was also conducted somewhat recently. We'll also be going through some challenges and some opportunities that you guys have been going in your research office lately. And we'll discuss what is working for you and what kind of hurdles or barriers you may be having in your offices. And then we'll conclude with kind of going over some RP resources that may be useful to you to your work now, and then discussing like what we can offer you in the future to help you do your best work at your offices. And of course, we'll end with a Q&A and some discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. So the purpose of this survey was really to get a look at what different functions the IR offices across the California colleges are doing. And more specifically, we really want to provide like an advanced statewide perspective of what the different colleges are doing. So there are 116 colleges now. Back when this started 20 years ago, there weren't quite as many. But really, what we are seeing is that there's been, some broadening of our roles across the state. So this report really allows us to provide some like statewide benchmarking for different information across the IRP offices and really documenting how our offices have evolved throughout the years. We offer this report to inform our work on what we can offer you on professional development to help you do the best work, like I said before. And really, it's to provide information so that you can advocate for yourselves and we can help advocate for you for what you need to do your work. So this report was conducted back in September and October of 2025. We send this report out to all of our contacts, 135 different IRPE leads in the California Community College system. And we got back this time around 94 offices that were responding, which gives us about a 70% response rate. This involves 81 colleges and 13 districts. So there are IRP offices at the colleges as well as some at the districts. And for the most part, most of our sample is coming from either a college. So either from a single district college or a college that is in a multi-college district. And about 14% of our sample came from a district office. Now, we've done this, like I said, this survey for the last 20 years. The first iteration of this report was conducted by phone, believe it or not, in 2005. And we have evolved survey to really kind of gather more information about the different roles. So this time around, if you were here for the last iteration in 2023, you'll see that there were just mostly the same questions, but just a couple little differences. One of the main differences here is that this time around, we asked about your use of artificial intelligence and what you're using in your offices. And specifically in the report, we're also comparing our kind of functions and our roles and the different work that we do in our California offices to a 2024 AIR National Survey where they surveyed over 500 different IR offices throughout the nation. But specifically for our report, we're going to be comparing the results that come from other public two-year institutions. So this includes about 118 different institutions that made it to the survey. So we'll be comparing what they do in their office work, how their staffing might be different, as well as how their organizational structures might different or be similar to ours. They also conducted another survey in 2023 where they asked people about their AI usage. So this was sent out to several thousand members in their institution. And unfortunately, we don't have the kind of disaggregation from two-year colleges, but we'll just kind of offer these numbers so that we can kind of compare to what we're doing here in California. So we'll start off with kind of talking about like what the organizational structure and kind of the workforce trends look like in our community colleges. Um, for the most part, what we see is that a lot of the IRPE offices are reporting to kind of this higher level administrator roles. So we do see that the IRP offices in California have been maintaining a high level of institutional visibility because for the most part, almost over half of them, 67% of colleges, for example, are reporting to a president or a superintendent. But a little bit over a quarter are reporting to a vice president or executive vice president. And then about 4% reported they reported to some other different type of role. For district offices, the structure looks a little bit different. For the most part, so over 75% are reporting to a vice chancellor or an associate vice chancellor or an assistant vice chancellor, and about 23% said they report to a chancellor at their district. So what we're seeing here is that we really have IR offices involved with kind of these higher level administrative roles, meaning that they have kind of the ear of those roles and really are working with those roles a little bit more. Nationally, however, we didn't see as high as big as a percentage of these two-year colleges reporting to like a president level kind of role. And a lot of the information that was in the survey said that these offices are really wanting to seek closer ties with their presidents so they can kind of have more of a influence at that kind of level at their colleges or universities. We are also seeing just like where people are working at. You know, as we all know, about 5 years ago, a large number of us went to remote work. And then since then, we kind of seen a little bit of fluctuation of some offices going back into the office, some offices continuing to offer that remote option. And what we saw this time around in our survey was that 70% of the offices that responded to the survey are utilizing like a hybrid employment model, meaning that they are having options where they can both work on site as well as have some options where some days they are working remotely at home. Um, this saw a really big jump from the last time we did this survey about 2 years ago, where that number was only around 59%. So we're really seeing kind of a move away from our work being strictly on site. And when you compare this to how IR offices are doing their work nationwide, they're not as high as us. About only 48% said they were allowed to do some type of hybrid work. When we take a look at staffing, budget, and capacity challenges, we asked you like how many people are working in your offices, and what kind of work they do, and then specifically like what barriers or challenges you may be facing to do the work in your office. So what we're seeing here is that the average FTE or full-time equivalent staff for this time around was about 4.6. And this is the average across both colleges and district offices. And we are seeing that this kind of average number has been increasing over the few years. And it's starting to get to the point of our kind of pre-pandemic numbers, where our average kind of peaked at 5.0. So we slowly seem to be getting rebounding toward these pre-pandemic norms. We do see some differences in how colleges and districts kind of staff their offices. We're seeing a lower average for colleges at about 4.4 full-time equivalent staff, whereas the districts have a little higher average at 6.1. Although we did see that the average kind of FTE does kind of increase with the size of the college. So for the most part, all of our districts were kind of equivalently sized, so we don't really have a size comparison for them. But for colleges, we saw that the average FTE kind of increased as the size of the college itself is increasing. So kind of showing that they do kind of, as they have more increased capacity, for example, in the sense of having more students, they're having more people work in their offices. Nationally, when we compare this to how two-year offices are staffed across the nation, we do have a considerably higher FTE, where the average for the nationwide kind of average was 2.9. So looks like we have a little bit more support in our offices than two-year public institutions nationwide. When we asked about whether your staffing or your budgets have changed, and even though we did kind of show this really moderate growth in our average FTE over the past few years, most offices are still kind of reporting that they have either no changes in their budgets or no changes in their staffing. So for the most part, 69% of offices said that their budget hasn't changed, and 72% of the offices said that their staffing hasn't changed. And we do see kind of a smaller percentages seeing that they did increase, and like an almost equivalent of that percentages seeing that their budgets or staffing has decreased. So the most part, it seems that increase in average FTE has been coming from a smaller portion of IRPE offices. Now, what we asked different offices is that they have been having any challenges in providing kind of this high quality equity work. And 57% of offices said that they did have challenges in providing this high quality equity support for their colleges, kind of implying that there's this little bit of a capacity gap. When we ask specifically about like what are those challenges, or what kind of is getting in your way of providing this high quality equity support, offices reported that there are chronic capacity issues, because there is often kind of this staffing shortages, people coming in and out. Some colleges mentioned having just one-person shops, whether they are the only person in their office that are providing research and planning support for their colleges. Some offices said that they had a lot of positions that kind of have these long-term vacancies, where some of their roles are being left vacant for more than 2 years. And this is really leading to fewer people and more work, and leading to what some people have called burnout. They've also mentioned that there are infrastructure gaps at their colleges that are making it a little bit harder to provide this type of support. So things like technical transitions, such as having to build a new data warehouse or moving away from certain platforms. Like some people mentioned having to move from Tableau to Power BI. They're often creating like these temporary periods of like data instability because they don't have access to their data warehouse, or limited accessibility because they don't have the same access as they used to. And a lot of people mentioned kind of like that these issues are compounded by like messy data that they may be, experiencing at in their offices or the colleges or institutions, and this like lack of standardization of how the data are being recorded and then pulled from their data warehouse. So there seems to be these kind of like technical infrastructure data gaps that are creating some challenges for these offices. Some offices also spoke to political and cultural hurdles that are getting, making it a little bit harder to provide this support. So their success, they said, was kind of hindered when there's a lack of data literacy or political will, quote unquote, among their leadership. They have also mentioned experiencing some resistance to using data by, for example, for like faculty performance reviews or other kind of organizational issues where data is perhaps not accepted as much as they would have liked, which kind of further complicates their researcher role. A lot of people also mention this initiative fatigue because is constant, often what this sort of like duplicative state and federal mandates that they have to now report to. And then kind of this like piecemeal grant funding where staff is being pulled away to work on these mandates or these kind of grant funding efforts. And this is pulling away staff from really focusing on providing like this lower, higher quality equity work at their offices. Um, a lot of offices are saying that because of these challenges, their offices are often resorted to just being only having time for like basic compliance reporting and not being able to do a deeper dive into some additional issues that they would might like to do at their office. And we see when we look at the air survey, we see that these concerns are kind of similarly voiced across the nation. 13% of the two-year public institutions nationwide said that they also kind of operate as one-person shops. This is a little bit higher than what we reported at around 6%. And although they didn't have like similar questions to what we asked, they still were able to voice these concerns through other questions. For example, they were asked if they were able to do their work without doing overtime, and 40% of the IR offices nationwide said that they can't meet their kind of day-to-day needs without working some overtime. Um, this is kind of mirrored when we looked at open-ended questions about, who mentioned either staffing or excessive workloads as part of their challenges. And we saw that 31% of the people who answered the survey had mentioned one of these concerns to just kind of show that, in essence, our offices are understaffed, have additional needs and additional needs that their staff is maybe needing some additional help to meet. Now, when we wanted to know what different functions IRP offices are conducting in their day-to-day, we saw that there are functions as an IRPE offices that have really been evolving from really for we used to be more research to really more strategy, district and college wide. So our traditional role of has really expanded beyond just like traditional data collection and reporting. Back when we did this the first time around in 2005, 76% of offices reported they were involved in research. Only 32% they said they were involved in like college-wide planning, and only 2% said they were involved in assessment. When you compare this now to our more recent administration of the survey into 2025, 20 years later, almost all offices have some type of role, either supporting or leading research, planning, and assessment across their institutions. So we're really seeing a shift in how, like what roles and what functions and what support IRP offices are providing across California. When we compared this to kind of what offices are doing nationwide, only 15% of these offices said that they were providing like this institutional level support. A lot of the functions that they mentioned were more compliance based. So it does seem that California kind of has a more, more intricate role, more involved college-wide, more district-wide than our counterparts nationwide. Now, when we take a look to see if, college offices are functions differ from district offices, we do see a really big difference in what kind of support each of these types of offices are providing. For colleges, they really have shifted from providing like a broader set of functions. So they are involved in kind of all levels of planning across their colleges. For example, they're involved in like program reviews, strategic planning, things like that. So things that are kind of like more overall planning the college wide. Significantly more of these college offices are reporting being involved in accreditation efforts. So 51% say they provide data or some sort of support for accreditation, and 49, almost an equal proportion, saying they are actually leading their accreditation efforts at their colleges. We also see that almost everyone is involved in equity, either leading equity work, but mostly providing support for equity work. We see a greater number of colleges being involved in like grant and resource development. I believe that 20 years ago, this percentage was also kind of in the single digits, and this has moved to 75% of college offices saying that they are supporting these efforts, and 20% saying that they are leading these efforts. And then we also see a large proportion of college offices providing support for organizational development. Um, when we look at what district offices are offering, we see, a difference in the kind of support that they are processing. So district offices are kind of placing a greater emphasis on data management and reporting. So a large number of district offices are actually leading like their 320 reporting, for example. So over half of them say they lead 320 reporting, over half of them say they lead business intelligence and process analysis functions. Over half say they are leading college-wide planning and evaluation functions, and over half said they are leading MIS data submissions. So this is probably not surprising that the kind of the our offices at this level are providing this type of support. But district offices are also providing, support for like program review, research and evaluation, a lot of support for vision aligned reporting, accreditation efforts as well as grants. And all district offices said they were involved in supporting their equity efforts across their districts. So we're really seeing kind of this more, I suppose, like technical support and function from our district offices. Um, when we kind of compare this nationwide, like I said, there was more kind of compliance, more just reporting, and less kind of like that planning and involvement at kind of like a higher level. Now, one of the new things we kind of asked about here is their AI usage at our California offices, as well as kind of like their data infrastructure. So, what kind of access do they have to their data warehouses? What kind of, if data dashboard platforms do are they using? And for the most part, we are seeing that more district offices this time around report having access to their data warehouses. So 78% said that they have access to their data warehouse. And the most frequently kind of student information systems that they are using are Banner, Colleague, PeopleSoft, and only 2% of the IR offices mentioned using something else. One thing that we did see kind of a drop off here is last time around we saw a couple of colleges mention that they have like their kind of own homegrown student information system. This time around, nobody mentioned using a homegrown student information system. So that could just be that they are no longer using it or that those colleges didn't participate this time around. But we are seeing here that there was a shift in how many colleges and districts are using Banner. Almost half, about 48% of the colleges and districts that responded to this survey said that they were using Banner now. And this is up almost 10% from 2 years ago, where only 39% said that they were using Banner. And then the percentages for the other kind of Colleague and PeopleSoft did go down a tiny bit. So we are seeing maybe like a shift of more colleges and districts using Banner. Um, when we asked about using data dashboards, I remember perhaps a few years ago, data dashboards, started emerging in our offices. There was a shift in using, um, Tableau, Power BI, things like that. A lot more of our roles are involving building these kind of data dashboards. And I believe last time around, almost all offices reported seeing reported using data dashboards. So this time around, everybody said that they're using it. So this used to be now a universal kind of software that people are using or resource that they are providing for their colleges. And the most popular platforms being mentioned were Power BI. Over half said that they were using. And this is actually a big jump from the last time because only 39% of offices said they were using Power BI. Back then, Tableau was kind of the number one, but Tableau has kind of decreased a tiny bit. And you will notice that these add up to more than 100 because some colleges did kind of say they used both more recently or were transitioning, so they were using both. So most of the people who had mentioned moving from like Tableau, for example, to Power BI mentioned that it was for cost reasons, because I do believe Power BI is significantly less monies for that subscription. 15% of other colleges did say that they use some other type of platform. And the one that came up the most was Precision Campus. So that one seems to be also increasing in popularity. I do see a question in the chat about respondents mentioning SaaS transition. I want to say maybe a couple. There wasn't too many that had mentioned that particular one, because for the most part, people seem to be either using Power BI or Tableau, or if there was a transition being mentioned, there it was from like Tableau to Power BI. I also do remember that. Um, there was like a banner data dashboard platform that a couple of people have mentioned, but it was just here and there. So there may be things coming along the pipeline that may be gaining some popularity as we see kind of like our data dashboards becoming more universal, and we may be having like more vendors just out there providing that service for us. We asked about data AI usage. Hot new thing here around. A lot of conversation happening about like artificial intelligence, how to use it in our day-to-day kind of roles. And when we asked about if they're using this in any capacity, 15 to 1% of offices said that they are using it in their day-to-day operations. However, for the most part, a lot of this usage seems to be either like unstructured or it's just kind of like individual people experimenting independently when they have really no formal like department policy about like how or if they can use AI. So it seems to be mostly like um, just like experimentation between individuals. Um, People are also saying it's more like an emerging or like an opportunistic type of usage where they're having like this early adoption of AI on a case by case business where not really there's being much oversight about how they're using it or for what reasons. Nationally, our offices said that their usage was more just like reactive, which is more just like maybe perhaps here and there if something comes up or it's not occurring at all. So it does seem that our California IRP offices are, a little bit ahead of the trend, perhaps in our day-to-day operations in the usage of AI. Um, when we asked about like what tools you are using, for the most part, a lot of people are saying that they're using ChatGPT for their AI needs, and then also kind of a larger proportion, about a third, saying that they're using Microsoft Copilot. Um, Now, because this is kind of like a newer kind of thing, there were kind of sprinkles here and there of other tools that were mentioned. Claude was mentioned a few times. Um, Google's Notebook LM was mentioned a few times, and PlayLab was mentioned a few times. I am not familiar with what PlayLab is, but I'd be interested perhaps if anybody in your office uses that. Like when we get to the discussion portion, we might talk about like what these different tools are providing, how you may be using them. But for the most part, ChatGPT seems to be the most popular one right now. Now, one of the things that we really wanted to know is like for those offices that like either didn't mention that they were having challenges or had some successes in their strategies for providing like this high quality equity work, we asked them like, what is it that is helping you? What is it that you are using to help you succeed? And then in that, like, what is it that the RP group can provide you to help you succeed in your further work? When we asked about like a lot what their successful strategies were, four different kind of things came up. The first was this intentional hiring, where they're really looking at and focusing on hiring people who have a background in like works or have some knowledge in like equity frameworks that have, those kind of like beyond technical skills that could help them really do like the equity work in their offices. So really looking more closely at having those additional perhaps soft skills or knowledge of equity work that has been helping them, further provide that type of work at their college. For those that have perhaps mentioned like a workload capacity or staffing capacity as a challenge, those were often handled by this like technical automation. So some offices mentioning leveraging like ad hoc warehouses that more closely align to like their day-to-day needs. So pulling data from those types of warehouses was more automated or less work than perhaps it was before. Also creating different type of like workflows using SQL or R that can kind of help their day-to-day be a little bit more automated and helping their workload or their either lack of staffing by using technology to help up with that. One of the key things that was also mentioned was having this like institutional trust. So really them securing like executive buy-in on the importance of doing like this equity work was really important, and having like this high level political capital that was really helpful to them. So some this, they kind of have other members to help them see the importance of and help them prioritize this type of work. And finally, we saw that building these collaborative partnerships across your institution was really critical to successfully providing this equity work. People mentioned, developing close ties with like their DEI offices, with their IT offices, with their student service offices, so that the work is really more spread out across their institution and not completely on the IR office. And this has helped with both, reporting needs, making sure that they're reporting data that they're reporting on are aligning across the different offices, that they have knowledge of what, information is important to collect, what information is, how to collect this information, to help them kind of collect the data, but also to help them use the data so that can be further used for equity work across their institutions. And then when we asked if there were any, RP group resources that have really helped them with this type of work, or helped them with work across their IRPE offices, we saw that several things were mentioned. So a lot of what we call our legacy framework, such as the 6 factors of student success, came up a few times. That there is a Great Transfer Initiative research came up with these times, and we've had several kind of spin-offs from this work, with for example, the African American transfer tipping point work came from Through the Gate, as well as our more current rural transfer and geographic barriers work that also kind of spun out from the Through the Gate transfer work. A lot of people mentioned VAR Academy, so vision aligned reporting was kind of like the new mandate that a lot of people mentioned, having to put additional resources into, both, for the personnel, the technology, et cetera. That they now, since we have to collect data on this VAR stuff, the VAR Academy was mentioned to be really useful for offices that have participated in that. Several people also mentioned specific guides that we have out there that can be useful. For example, this portion impact guide was mentioned a few times. Also, our work with transforming leadership at your campuses with our Leading from the Middle Academy was mentioned as being really useful for supporting the equity work across your campuses. And then our annual conferences that we have throughout the years was mentioned to be a good space for like networking, getting new ideas, and collaborating with other offices across the state. And we have 2 of these, the ARPE conference, which is usually held in April, and the Strengthening Student Success Conference, which is usually held in October of every year. When we talked about like what specific needs you might be needing from us so that we can focus kind of our upcoming professional development for things that you really need. A lot of the requests were focused on less on compliance and more on like innovation, and roughly around these 5 areas. First, of course, we know that AI and other kind of emerging tech is kind of coming up more. So members wanted kind of more hands-on labs with like integrated artificial intelligence with like, for example, programming languages, so like SQL or Python, that could help them build some of this work, or building like data chat boxes or navigating through like the ethics of using like predictive analytics or artificial intelligence day-to-day work. So definitely this kind of AI and emerging technology is kind of thing that was on top of mind when we spoke to different IR leads. There was some talk about data governance and standards. So there seems to be like this high demand for more of like a rubber meets the road type of tools, that include things like maybe a data governance handbook or templates or guidance on like, for example, new federal race and ethnicity coding, that they could kind of use to do in like their day-to-day operations. There's also talk about a lot of like these new policy and state mandates, where they need help with meeting some of these reporting mandates. So respondents said like they would like some like work in progress sessions on like implementing VAR or AB 1705, or any kind of policy updates that are coming from the chancellor's office statewide, that they kind of need these more kind of hands-on help with meeting this different type of policy and state mandates. There was also a lot of talk about like strategic planning and doing work that has, more return on investment. So moving beyond just kind of this like data production, and focusing more on like creating data-informed resources, and streamlining things like program review, that may be helpful to utilize at their institutions. Um, and then finally, one of the things that was requested from us is like this leadership and advocacy, where they could be used, for example, with like staff retention or like coaching up, navigating through like complex legal issues or like public records for requesting equity data. There's just like kind of guidance on how we could advocate with for us at our institutions. And then when we specifically asked about like specific resources that they may want us to create, um, they were calling for more of like nuts and bolts kind of technical support in this like organizational advocacy. So key requests included like I said, these data governance and stewardship frameworks, practical toolkits for like hiring, or like classification studies, to ensure kind of like the IRPD competencies are clearly defined for like human resources and kind of search committees. There was also like a strong desire for skill builder workshops that are focused on like programming languages such as SQL, data storytelling, or like different kind of research methods such as like longitudinal analysis, can be geared toward more for like onboarding new analysts, or helping like smaller colleges or more rural colleges where the research help is not as substantial, so they can kind of connect through, like affinity groups amongst the IRP offices. So that is kind of like the broad scopes of the findings that we saw for this time around in when we from the survey in our IRP offices. So, question for you guys now is, what did you see in these data? Is there anything that kind of sparked a thought? Is there anything that was surprising or not surprising? Thinking about perhaps like how you could use this information in your different offices, what this might be helpful for you to like advocate for yourself or advocate for resources that the ARPA group can help you. Was there anything in these data, in these findings that you were like, oh, okay, that was kind of interesting? Um, and while you're all kind of getting your thoughts on that, feel free to type it or feel free to unmute yourself if you would like. But Luis here is had another comment about the SaaS transition, about how Ellucian and DataTel is in um, strongly suggesting that districts switch over to adopt SaaS to access data. Um, so I'm not familiar with that, Luis. I don't know if you want to speak more toward that, or perhaps another office is kind of having similar experience with this with Lucian, um, having this new access being kind of changed.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. This is Luis. The only thing I'll quickly say is that at Merced College, we're in the process of making that transition. And in speaking with a few colleges who have already made that transition, it's been a headache, frustration. It's really changing how we do our jobs. Um, it's just a huge, huge change from what I've heard anecdotally with the colleges that I spoke with. So I was just wondering if those sentiments were being shared here. I've been in contact with Brad about possibly doing a workshop later on this topic because it's going to impact a lot of schools and a lot of IRPE offices specifically. Well, it's going to impact everybody from like student fees to financial aid to HR. It's just a big, big change. Thank you.
Yes, I could definitely see how that would be a big, really big change when you're really needing to switch over how you're used to doing your day to day. Perhaps when I don't know if this was like a really recent change. Perhaps when we conducted the survey, it was kind of maybe just beginning to happen. So it could be that, more offices are going through it now. Or that's something that may be coming up, but would definitely keep an ear out about anyone else mentioning this transition or looking into like resources that could be helpful for you. And if nobody else has anything else, just wondering like how could we improve the next survey? So, like I said, we started this 20 years ago. Our questions have changed and evolved throughout that time as we've been needing to, now ask about new things or as we see our roles shifting significantly. I will say that the survey before was a lot shorter. We didn't have that huge list of functions as we did these more recent surveys. So we really do see that the IR role is evolving statewide, and it's really from when we compare the AIR's results, they are very different from what other kind of IR offices are doing at a national or nationwide. Um, so this is kind of thinking like what information is missing about these surveys. I know that one thing, for example, is we asked you if you're using AI and what tool you're using, but we didn't specifically ask about like how you're using it, or more specifically, like what concerns you may be having about using AI. So Stephen here says that they would like to know how many institutions are starting to use AI agents. Uh, so from what we and I'm not specifically familiar with the term agentic AI, but we do know at least that like half of the institutions have mentioned using AI, and but it all seems to be like maybe perhaps individual people just exploring here and there. We did ask if institutions had like a specific AI policy or that was implemented at their institution, and only one office said yes. So for the most part, this still seems to be very emerging about like what to do with AI and how to use it, that sort of thing. So anybody have any, further thoughts on AI? I will say if you get an email from me, there's 25% chance that AI wrote it, but because
This
sometimes my brain doesn't work.
is Soma from the College of Marine. So at the College of Marine, we started uh, looking at what policy framework would be useful for adopting AI
Hmm.
here. As a collective, we have a mix of faculty and administrative professionals looking at this issue. And we have started talking about it, but we don't have a policy yet. We are looking at some models that are out there for community colleges that have progressed along a little further in their journey. And we're hoping to put a policy framework in place in the near future. And then our college is also extensively using Microsoft Copilot for AI. That I think is our college's currently approved one because it follows our security guidelines
Hmm.
and it follows the FERPA, plus it ensures that our college's data doesn't go out of our own boundaries. So those are some of the considerations that I think has geared us towards Microsoft Copilot so far, but we're also testing Nectar AI, which is a relatively new one. Sure, you guys are aware of that, but anyway, we are looking at other things by primarily we are Copilot organization. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of the considerations that go into, whether or not we use AI and what goes into our policies, definitely like ethical concerns. As researchers, we have data that we have to meet FERPA, we have to meet maybe IRB, kind of like confidentiality, things like that. And so, how do we start using AI in a responsible way? And so I do know a little, Microsoft Copilot seems to be one that has been emerging, perhaps because it's just more accessible. A lot of colleges use Microsoft's products already. I know that one day I just turned on my computer and it just had it. So it's something that's a little bit more accessible, but I think definitely if we are smart and responsible with how we use it, it can be useful. But still keeping in mind that, we are stewards of data, we are responsible for the data that we use, and we want to make sure that it's not going into something that maybe, perpetuating biases or that may be, affecting privacy or confidentiality or anything like that. So definitely a lot of things that our institutions will have to keep in mind. Adriana says that they created a couple of agents to help with DAX debugging and report editing. Yeah, I could see how the definitely using it for coding could be really useful. I know I've used it. I've tried to use it a couple of times for writing code, more specifically in like R, and writing like some macros for like Excel. And I found it to be useful just to kind of start sometimes. Because sometimes for me, it's just easier to like fix something that's wrong than to just like start completely from scratch. But I could definitely see how something like using it for like DAX, if you're using like Power BI, would be super helpful and help with kind of like that, just like manual time-consuming work.
So, hi, Daisy. This is Sherry Sterner at Orange Coast. Wanted to just in terms of future surveys, I think it would be helpful to know, the colleges that are integrating AI use into their dashboards for use by the end users. And so it would be helpful to know if folks had done that and then which dashboard, which products they were using. Because like with Power BI, you'll use, I believe they have a Copilot AI and Tableau has their own or a couple options. So that would be helpful to know because I think I know at Orange Coast, a lot of our end users are asking for AI in the dashboards where they could just ask questions and it provide that to them. So that would be helpful to, I think, start tracking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely how they're using it for like day-to-day dashboards. And I would be interested also to know like if they are using AI to, interpret the results or whatever they may be using in the dashboard and if how like correct that is, or if there still needs to be like some nuance in kind of that type of reporting. So definitely something that we'll keep in mind.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there's nothing else that you guys kind of thought, feel free to send things out our way. We're always available. If you guys have any questions, you can contact me or Brad. Well, I usually do the survey kind of analysis, but Brad is our day-to-day professional development guy, and he's the one who gets you the stuff that you need. So if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out. And if you do want access to the report with all these data, you can use the QR code there.